Right now, as you were listening to this, your heart is beating, somewhere between 60 and 100 times a minute.
Hopefully somewhere in that range, yeah.
Right. But here is the biological secret that they definitely did not teach you in high school biology class. Your heart is actually not pumping your blood.
It's wild to even say out loud, but yeah, it's not a pump.
I mean, if your heart actually functioned as a mechanical pressure pump, the sheer physical force required to push blood through your entire body, it would literally blow out the bottom of the organ on the very first beat.
It would just structurally fail immediately.
Exactly. We're always told the heart is just this biological machine, right? Like a fleshy metronome that keeps the plumbing moving.
Just pushing the fluid around.
But I mean, think about that feeling you get, that heavy, undeniable pressure right in the center of your chest when you're avoiding a really difficult truth. What if that isn't just some poetic metaphor for anxiety?
Right, what if it's physiological?
Yeah, or what about that magnetic pull you feel toward a major life decision? The kind that makes absolutely zero logical sense on paper, but it just feels right in your bones. What if that is actually a highly advanced sensory mechanism at work?
Because that's exactly what our sources are pointing to today.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is to completely dismantle basically everything you think you know about the human heart. And by extension, human consciousness and the evolution of humanity itself.
It is a massive topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are exploring a radical premise today. We're looking at the idea that the human heart is actively evolving from a state of isolated separation consciousness into an organ of unity consciousness and supersensible perception.
It's a staggering premise to try and wrap your head around, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
And to explore it properly, we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. And what I love is that these sources deliberately bridge a gap that most people assume is, completely unbridgeable.
Like mixing oil and water.
Exactly. Because on one side, we are looking at cutting-edge biophysics. We've got modern neurocardiology and the clinical depths of Jungian psychology.
Hard science and deep psychology.
Right. But then on the exact opposite side, we're diving straight into the esoteric spiritual science of Rudolf Steiner, specifically his framework of anthroposophy.
Which is pretty heavy mystical stuff.
It is. But by bringing the work of, mechanical engineers and modern cardiologists into direct conversation with mystics, we can trace this invisible through line. We're connecting the physical, supposedly mechanical flow of your blood to the literal cosmic destiny of the human soul.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the spiritual destiny of the heart, I feel like we have to start by completely unlearning the physical lie we were all taught in school.
You can't grasp the spiritual mechanics until you fix the physical ones, yeah.
Right, we have to tear down the biology textbook.
Yeah.
And the very first assumption we need to dismantle today is the idea that the heart is a pump.
Which is tough because orthodox cardiology has operated on that exact assumption for centuries. This idea that the heart is a pressure pump responsible for driving fluid.
But our sources highlight some pretty intense investigative work here, right?
Yeah, by researchers and engineers, people like Ralph Marinelli, Dr. Branko First, and John Barnwell.
And these aren't just guys theorizing in a basement.
No, these are individuals who spent decades looking at the raw physics and the structural anatomy of the cardiovascular system. And what they proved, using fluid dynamics, is that the human heart is physically, structurally incapable of being a pressure pump.
Okay, hold on. Because I know someone listening is slamming on the brakes right now.
That would be too.
Right. Because the idea that the heart pumps blood, that's like page 1 of any medical textbook. It's universally accepted by every doctor on earth. How can a group of researchers, especially engineers, claim it isn't doing the one thing we all take for granted?
It ultimately comes down to basic fluid dynamics. And while structural engineering, let's look at Ralph Marinelli, for example. Yep. So Marinelli was a highly respected engineer. He ran a massive laboratory, and he basically decided to test this foundational biological assumption using the actual laws of physics.
Which makes sense.
Right. So he acquires a fresh beef heart and dissects it meticulously. He's examining the architecture of the muscle fibers, going all the way down to the apex.
And the apex is the very bottom tip of the heart.
Exactly, that pointy bit at the bottom. And what he observes immediately is that the apex is just this incredibly thin, double-layered hinge of flesh.
So it's fragile.
It is fundamentally delicate, yes. Now think about the physics. If the heart were actually a pressure pump, it would be responsible for generating enough brute force to push highly viscous fluid. Blood is thick. you know?
Yeah, it's a lot thicker than water.
Right. It has to push that thick fluid through thousands of miles of microscopic capillaries that are distributed all over the body.
The resistance there has to be insane.
The sheer physical pressure required to overcome that amount of vascular resistance is astronomical. So Marinelli realizes that if the heart were actually generating that kind of internal pressure, that delicate, thin tissue at the bottom of the apex,
You would just give out.
it would blow out and rupture on the very first beat. The mathematical models simply do not work.
Wow.
The structural integrity of the biological tissue cannot withstand the force required to mechanically pump fluid through that much physical resistance.
I have to push back here, though, because this doesn't totally track for me yet, and I'm sure listeners are thinking the same thing.
Go for it.
If a patient goes into a hospital for open heart surgery, the surgeon literally stops the biological heart, right?
Yeah.
And they hook the patient up to a cardiopulmonary bypass machine.
Yes, they do.
And that machine is undeniably a mechanical pump. It successfully pumps the blood around the body, and it keeps the patient alive for hours. So how can we say the heart isn't a pump if a literal machine does the exact same thing and the patient lives?
That is the pivotal question. But looking closely at the answer actually reveals the entire illusion.
Okay, how so?
Well, while it is true that a mechanical bypass machine can pump blood and keep a patient alive temporarily, we have to look at what physically happens to the blood when you force it to move that way.
Because the machine is doing it differently.
Completely differently. Mechanical pumps move fluid through brute pulsatile pressure. They shove it. And when you apply that kind of blunt pushing force to human blood, it destroys the structural integrity of the blood cells.
So it's actually causing damage.
Massive damage. It causes a condition known as hemolysis. Basically, the red blood cells are subjected to intense shear stress and they get shredded by the pressure.
Oh, wow. That sounds terrible.
It is. And furthermore, pushing blood this way causes massive microcapillary damage throughout the patient's body. The delicate vessels in the brain are particularly vulnerable to this brute force.
Which explains a lot of post-surgery complications, I imagine.
Exactly. It results in a very real, well-documented clinical condition known as pump head.
Pump head.
Yeah, it's characterized by measurable cognitive decline, memory loss, and even personality changes after patients undergo long surgeries on a bypass machine.
So it's essentially like trying to push a delicate silk thread through the eye of a needle using a sledgehammer.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
You might manage to get the thread through the hole and the patient survives, but you are going to destroy the silk and probably fracture the needle in the process. The machine uses a highly destructive mechanism.
That is highly accurate because the biological beating heart does not damage a single red blood cell. So it must be operating on an entirely different physical principle than brute force.
Right. So if it isn't a pressure pump pushing the blood from behind, the obvious question becomes, what is actually moving the blood?
And this is where the biophysics gets truly paradigm shifting. The sources point to this groundbreaking discovery by Dr. Gerald Pollack. He was researching what he termed the fourth phase of water.
Also known as exclusion zone or EZ water.
Exactly, easy water.
And since our blood is composed mostly of water, this completely changes everything we know about circulation.
It changes the whole game. Pollack discovered that when water is placed next to a hydrophilic surface, meaning a surface that loves water, and it's exposed to ambient environmental energy, something crazy happens.
What kind of energy?
Particularly invisible infrared light. When that happens, the water fundamentally changes its physical state. Now, our blood vessels are constructed entirely of hydrophilic tissue.
Okay, so they love water.
Right. And infrared light from the sun is constantly penetrating through our skin, reaching deep into our internal organs.
Even when we're wearing clothes.
Oh yeah, ambient infrared is everywhere. So when this ambient light hits the water inside the hydrophilic walls of our blood vessels, it creates a massive, spontaneous separation of electrical charge.
I really want to make sure we visualize this clearly for you listening. Imagine the water right at the edge of your blood vessel wall suddenly organizing itself into a dense, slippery gel layer.
Almost like a flexible tube of ice.
Yeah, like a tube of ice. And this gel layer literally pushes all the positive electrical charge away from the walls toward the center of the vein, leaving a dense negative charge right along the lining.
That gel layer is the exclusion zone. You have now created a massive separation of positive and negative charges inside the vessel.
Positive in the middle, negative on the wall.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which means you have essentially built a self-sustaining biological battery.
Wow.
And because of this massive charge gradient, the blood effectively propels itself. The vessel becomes a frictionless slip and slide.
That is incredible.
The blood slides effortlessly down the vascular system, driven entirely by the ambient infrared energy of the environment interacting with the water. The blood is moving under its own power.
That just completely flips our understanding of biology upside down. The blood is its own engine. But if the blood is moving itself, driven by the physics of light and water, what is the biological heart actually doing sitting there in the center of the chest?
If it's not a pump, what is it? Right. Well, the heart acts as a vortex momentum booster and, crucially, a sensory listening organ, an oracle.
An oracle. That's a strong word for a muscle.
It really fits, though. It doesn't push the river. It elegantly organizes the current. Doppler ultrasound technology has actually revealed this. As blood passes through the chambers, the beating heart produces 3 audible and 1 inaudible vortex rings.
Almost like the way a dolphin blows those perfect spiraling bubble rings underwater to play with.
A very similar fluid dynamic, yeah, but infinitely more complex. The heart uses these spiraling frequency patterns to organize the billions of blood cells so they can travel perfectly through the branching vascular system.
So they don't crash into each other.
Right, so they don't collide, clot, and destroy each other at intersections. And to manage this incredibly complex fluid choreography, the heart relies on an anatomy that goes way beyond the standard 4 chambers we learn about in school.
Wait, there are more than 4 chambers?
According to our sources, yes. They outline a 5th chamber, which is the pericardium. That's the tough, fibrous sac surrounding the heart.
Which orthodox medicine usually just treats as a physical protective sleeve.
Right.
Like bubble wrap to prevent friction.
That is the standard view, yeah. But researchers are finding it is actually an intelligent reservoir. The pericardium holds specialized healing exosomes and complex enzymes in reserve.
Like a backup system.
Exactly. If the organ senses acute trauma, such as the initial stages of a myocardial infarction, a heart attack, the pericardium acts as an internal pharmacy. It releases these healing agents directly into the damaged tissue.
That is mind-blowing. It's diagnosing and treating itself.
And it gets deeper. Then you have what esoteric anatomists refer to as the 6th and 7th chambers, the auricles.
The oracles.
Yeah, these are small, ear-like muscular appendages attached to the atria.
I always thought those are just sort of evolutionary leftovers, like an appendix.
They aren't just vestigial leftovers at all. They can actually expand and contract like wings to manage excess blood volume in real time. They are constantly regulating pressure and flow based on the body's immediate needs.
So the heart is constantly listening. It is reading the blood's volume, its oxygen demands, its chemical markers, and its emotional state.
And it is listening on an even grander planetary scale.
What do you mean by planetary scale?
Well, the physical heart acts as a highly sensitive electromagnetic antenna. It naturally entrains the biological rhythms of the blood to the Schumann resonance.
And the Schumann resonance is basically the 7.83 hertz electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth itself, right?
Exactly. Your physical heart is literally attuning your internal biology to the vast, invisible rhythmic fields of the planet.
But how do we build this incredibly complex, vortex organizing, earth resonating sensory organ from scratch inside the womb? I mean, we aren't just assembling meat and tissue here.
No, it's way more complicated than just cellular division.
This takes us away from biophysics and deep into the esoteric blueprints of human anatomy, where we find some of the most mind-bending material in our sources.
Absolutely. To understand the genesis of the heart, we turn to the vast esoteric framework of Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy.
Okay, let's dive into Steiner.
In Steiner's view, human beings are not merely physical matter blindly assembling based on genetic code. Long before birth, we gather 2 invisible esoteric blueprints that dictate our biological and spiritual formation.
And those are?
The etheric body and the astral body.
We should definitely break those terms down. When we say etheric body or astral body, I think to a lot of modern listeners, it can sound a bit abstract, like fantasy jargon. How do we ground these concepts?
It's a fair point. The etheric body can be understood as the pure life force of an organism. It is the architectural blueprint of physical growth, form, and biological time.
So it's like the scaffolding for the physical body.
Right. But it is not just an amorphous, glowing cloud of energy. Steiner taught that the etheric body is a highly specific, literal geometric image of the macrocosm.
The macrocosm being the universe.
Yes. It contains the energetic configurations of the stars, the sun, and the moon from the exact moment of your incarnation. It is quite literally the universe folded inward to create a living template.
That is a beautiful image. And what about the astral body?
The astral body, on the other hand, is the seat of consciousness, subjective emotion, instinct, and pain. Furthermore, in this esoteric tradition, the astral body acts as the hard drive of our karma.
The hard drive of our karma. I like that phrasing.
Yeah, it carries the highly structured, objective records of our past actions, our unresolved traumas, and our moral deeds from across lifetimes.
Okay, so let me get this straight. A baby is born carrying a miniature, highly specific universe in their etheric body and a cosmic hard drive loaded with their karmic history in their astral body.
That is the basic premise, yes.
And according to Steiner, from birth to about age 7, a child operates basically as a giant, incredibly sensitive, imitative sense organ.
They are completely porous.
Right. They are running on this inherited cosmic life force they received from the cosmos and their mother. But then around age 7, a profound biological and spiritual milestone occurs.
The change of teeth.
The change of teeth. Losing the baby teeth.
It sounds so mundane, but in this framework, the losing of the baby teeth is viewed as a massive developmental turning point. It signals that the physical body has finally finished its preliminary, inherited earthly construction.
Like the foundation of the house is finally poured.
Exactly. The child is now beginning to produce their own independent life force. And at this precise moment, the inherited cosmic starry sphere of the etheric body begins to fade.
And what happens to that energy?
The energetic rays of those internal stars, which previously radiated outward to build the body, they begin to reverse direction. They shoot inward, pointing directly toward the center of the chest.
Let's talk toward the heart.
Toward the heart.
Which sets the stage for a massive collision. Because to understand what those etheric rays are pointing at, we have to look at what's happening to the astral body, that emotional, karmic hard drive, as the child grows toward puberty.
Right, because the astral body isn't just static. As a child grows, learns to speak, develops an ego, and begins acting independently in the world, their astral body begins to slip down and deeply integrate into their physical organs.
It's embedding itself.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is where the spiritual development becomes intensely personal. Every single moral and physical deed a child commits creates a reaction.
A reaction in the astral body.
Exactly. Whether it's chopping wood, telling a deliberate lie, performing an act of quiet generosity, or, as the older translated sources phrase it, giving someone a box on the ears.
I love that old school phrasing, giving someone a box on the ears.
Right. But the point is, it isn't just a fleeting psychological event. Every action creates a permanent, objective, energetic imprint in the astral substance.
So every single action, every moral compromise, every act of love is an objective, crystalline event recorded inside your spiritual anatomy.
Precisely. Now here is where the biology pushes back. Okay. Because the dense physical structure of the head and the brain is fundamentally cold and objective, it naturally rejects this fiery, emotional, astral energy.
The brain doesn't want the drama.
It really doesn't. So the body actively pushes all of these accumulated karmic deeds downward, away from the head, down into the chest cavity.
Which sets the biological and spiritual stage for the absolute crucible of puberty.
The crucible is right.
It's the ultimate software update.
It really is. At puberty, those inward-pointing cosmic rays of the etheric body finally converge in the center of the chest to form a brand new, highly individualized etheric heart.
Right.
And simultaneously, all those inscribed moral deeds that have been pushed down into the astral body centralize in the exact same location to form a new astral heart.
So it's like the biological hardware is running on a factory default operating system from the cosmos until you hit puberty. Then a massive, highly personalized software update finally installs itself, complete with all our own unique behavioral bugs, traumas, and brilliant code.
That analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. The heart is the exact anatomical crucible, where cosmic law, represented by the objective macrocosm of the etheric body, collides directly with human karma.
The subjective microcosm of the astral body.
Exactly. This intense collision finalizes the heart's initial spiritual and energetic form.
But this raises a huge philosophical problem for me. If the ultimate goal of the heart, with all this beautiful cosmic geometry and meticulous karmic record keeping, is to eventually return our ledger to the cosmos and achieve a state of high spiritual unity.
Yeah.
Why are we born into a state where we have to endure the turbulent, deeply isolating experience of building a personal ego? I mean, why do we have to build this psychological mask, this polite persona, just to survive in society? It feels like a massive step backward. Why not just start in unity?
It's a great question. To answer that, we have to zoom out and look at Steiner's overarching view of human history. He described it as a massive evolutionary loop.
An evolutionary loop.
Humanity doesn't just travel in a straight line of progress. It moves from a state of ancient unconscious unity, descends deeply into an era of separation and isolation, and then will finally ascend toward a future of conscious unity.
So what did that original unconscious unity actually look and feel like?
In the deep ancient past, Steiner taught that humans possessed an atavistic unity. They lacked an independent, introspective ego entirely.
So no inner monologue.
None. Ancient people didn't sit around contemplating their own private thoughts or having identity crises. They were deeply embedded in a passive, dreamlike collective group soul.
A hive mind.
Essentially, yes. They felt intimately connected to nature and the spiritual cosmos, but they had absolutely no true individual freedom. They acted collectively, directed by instinct and spiritual forces outside themselves.
And what's fascinating is how seamlessly this maps onto the psychological hypothesis of the bicameral mind.
Oh, Julian Jaynes' work. Yes.
Proposed by Julian Jaynes. The parallels are just undeniable here.
They really are. Jaynes looked at ancient texts like the Iliad or early Mesopotamian writings and hypothesized that early humans did not experience private internal monologue the way modern humans do.
Because if you read the Iliad, Achilles doesn't sit there and debate with himself.
Exactly. When faced with a crisis or a complex decision, they did not weigh options internally. Instead, they experienced auditory hallucinations. The right hemisphere of the brain transmitted commands to the left hemisphere.
And they interpreted that literally.
Yes, they literally interpreted it as the booming voices of the gods. They were directed by externalized guidance. There was no internal I making a choice.
So to break away from that ancient hive mind, humanity had to suffer a necessary detour. We had to experience a profound fall into intense individuation.
We had to become separate.
We had to become locked inside our own skulls, cut off from the direct guidance of the spiritual world, and cut off from the minds of each other. We had to become fundamentally isolated.
It was painful, but necessary.
Which brings me to a realization about the persona. You know, the polite mask we wear at the office, the curated image we project to our friends, all the defense mechanisms we build. It isn't a mistake or a modern psychological failing we should feel guilty about, is it?
Not at all. In the grand scheme of this evolutionary loop, the persona is an absolute necessity. It acts as a temporary scaffolding.
Scaffolding to protect the ego.
Yes, to protect the fragile, newly awakening inner spark of the individual ego. You cannot freely choose to love someone, and you cannot freely choose to seek spiritual truth until you first experience what it means to be a completely independent, isolated individual.
Because you have to have a self to give a self.
Appropriately said. Love requires freedom, and freedom requires a boundary. The psychological mask provides that critical boundary. It is a protective shell required during this specific phase of our earthly evolution.
But scaffolding is meant to come down eventually. I mean, you don't leave it up once the building is finished.
True. And the goal is never to violently smash the ego or forcefully tear down the personality before it is ready. Through slow, conscious inner development and moral maturation, the individual ego grows so strong in its true spiritual identity that the defensive shell naturally dissolves on its own.
It just falls away.
Right. The scaffolding only comes down safely when the internal building is strong enough to stand under its own weight.
But there is a massive glaring vulnerability in this system. We just established that the mask is necessary scaffolding. But scaffolding is fragile. What happens if a person experiences severe chronic stress or acute collective trauma, and that psychological boundary shatters before the inner self is ready to stand on its own?
It's disastrous.
Because the transition from living safely behind a mask to experiencing radical transparency and boundary dissolution, that sounds insanely perilous.
It is arguably the most dangerous psychological transition a human being can undergo. Steiner explicitly warned of a terrifying phenomenon that occurs when this protective boundary is destroyed prematurely.
What did he call it?
He called it the silent inversion. It's a literal functional fracture in human consciousness.
How does a silent inversion actually manifest in a person's experience? Like, what does it feel like?
Well, under normal, healthy conditions, the heart is the center of warmth, empathy, and feeling, while the mind is the center of cold, objective, rational observation.
Right. Head is cold, heart is warm.
But in the state of the silent inversion, the wires violently cross. The heart begins to generate cold, obsessive, calculating logic. Meanwhile, the mind is flooded with borrowed, chaotic emotions and terrors that don't seem to belong to the individual's rational life.
The heart thinks and the mind feels. That is deeply unsettling.
It is.
To illustrate how truly unsettling this is, our sources highlight a clinical case from the files of Carl Jung. He had a patient known as the listener.
Ah, yes, the listener.
This was a man who came into Jung's office and described what basically sounds like a horror movie scenario happening inside his own body. He told Jung he could suddenly hear his own thoughts beating inside his chest.
Right, like his heart was thinking.
Yeah, like an alien heart had taken over his rational faculties. And while his chest was producing these heavy, undeniable, calculating thoughts, his mind was crying uncontrollably with a grief and a violent anger he knew wasn't his own. He described feeling like his mind was crying with a voice much younger, or perhaps much older than his own.
It is a chilling and profound case study. The patient's heart had remembered hidden truths, buried trauma, and deep moral compromises that the man had spent decades actively denying.
Just to maintain his polite persona.
Exactly. The psychological pressure of maintaining the lie had grown too immense, the scaffolding collapsed, and the heart forced those truths to the surface, bypassing the rational filtering brain entirely.
And what blows my mind is that modern neurocardiology actually provides the physical mechanics to back this up. It's not just mystical poetry.
No, it provides the exact physiological roadmap for how this happens. We now know that the physical heart possesses its own intrinsic neural network.
The heart brain.
Yes. It contains over 40,000 sensory neurites capable of processing information, feeling, and storing memory-like patterns completely independently of the cranial brain.
That's a huge amount of processing power just sitting in the chest.
It is. Furthermore, the heart generates an electromagnetic field that is roughly 60 times stronger in electrical amplitude than the brain's field.
60 times.
60 times. So under severe emotional trauma or cognitive overload, the brain's default mode network, which is essentially the seat of our rational autobiographical self and our ego defense, can functionally shut down.
The firewall just dropped.
Exactly. And when this firewall drops, the vagus nerve, which normally carries a heavy amount of traffic down from the brain to regulate the body, reverses its dominant flow.
Oh, wow.
It begins sending massive, unfiltered amounts of sensory and emotional data upward from the heart directly into the brain. The heart stages a physiological coup.
The firewall drops. The brain is overwhelmed, and the heart takes over. And this inversion opens the door to a concept that both Carl Jung and ancient esoteric traditions warn about constantly.
The shadow.
The double, or the shadow. This is the hidden observer, built from every denied fear, every petty jealousy, every rationalized cruelty, and every abandoned truth you refuse to look at. When the inversion happens, the shadow steps out of the dark and demands immediate recognition.
And this raises a deeply unsettling question about the nature of our interconnectedness, because what happens when this psychological fracture doesn't stay neatly contained inside one person's head?
Because it doesn't, right?
No. As we noted, our electromagnetic heart fields naturally expand several feet outside our physical bodies, interacting with the environment. This inner fracture spills over. The shadow acts like a psychic pathogen.
Right, because if I'm having a silent inversion, my heart's chaotic, inverted electromagnetic field is physically interacting with yours. We're in the same room.
Exactly. And the sources outline a highly observable 5-stage collective descent that occurs when an unstable, inverted psychic field infects a social space.
Like a family dinner or a boardroom.
Or an entire society caught in a crisis, yeah.
Let's walk through these 5 stages, not as a clinical list, but as a scenario, because I think everyone listening will find them terrifyingly recognizable. Imagine you walk into a room where someone is silently spiraling.
Okay. The first stage you encounter is mirroring, or emotional contagion. You walk into that room feeling perfectly fine, and instantly, without a single word being spoken, you adopt someone else's tight jaw, their shallow breathing, and a sense of free-floating anxiety.
You just absorb it.
Yes. You don't know why you are suddenly anxious. It is because your own heart field is actively entraining to the chaotic frequency of the dominant shadow in the room. You catch their panic the exact same way you catch a virus.
Then the environment shifts into the second stage, field distortion. The physical space itself grows tangibly tense. You know, you can cut the air with a knife.
We've all felt that.
Right. Misunderstandings multiply instantly. You say something completely innocuous, like asking for the time. and it is received as a vicious, passive-aggressive insult.
The feel is distorting the communication.
And the sources even point to quantum biology here, hinting that human electromagnetic fields might interact with the subtle electrical environment around us. We've all heard stories of technology malfunctioning, computers crashing, or lights flickering when the emotional field in a room becomes highly unstable and explosive.
Which inevitably triggers the third stage, collective amplification. This is the chain reaction.
Like throwing a match into gasoline.
Exactly. One person's buried rage leaking out through their field triggers another person's buried insecurity. The shadow traits bounce off each other, accelerating the chaos. The rational minds in the room are completely bypassed by the heart fields communicating pure trauma to one another.
And the civilized persona completely vanishes in the fourth stage, which is archetypal manifestation.
This is where it gets surreal.
People stop acting like their normal, rational selves and fall into ancient mythological scripts. Someone suddenly becomes the authoritarian tyrant. Someone else collapses into the role of the helpless victim. Another becomes the vicious, unyielding accuser.
They lose all nuance.
Right, they are no longer individuals. They are acting out rigid roles written by the collective shadow.
Culminating in the final, most dangerous stage, possession of the field. This is the creation of what esoteric traditions call an egregor.
An egregor. What exactly is that force? It sounds intense.
It is. An egregor is a self-sustaining, independent psychic force born from intense mob mentality. The group stops being a collection of distinct individuals and begins to behave as a single irrational mind fed entirely by fear, anger, and shadow.
It takes over completely.
The entity takes on a life of its own, and it demands constant emotional fuel to survive. We see the egregor manifest in mass hysterias, in violent political polarization, in witch hunts, and in modern internet pile-ons. The egregor possesses the crowd, and the individuals lose all free will.
So, as a listener going about your daily life, how do you know if you're being pulled into the gravity well of an egregor, or if your own shadow is starting to leak?
The most prominent warning sign is what psychologists call emotional bleed. This is when you feel intense, disproportionate anger while doing something completely mundane, like simply washing the dishes or driving on an empty road.
It just hits you out of nowhere.
Right. Another sign is experiencing a heavy, unnatural silence in a group before a psychological storm breaks. If you feel these physical and emotional markers, you cannot just hope it passes. You must act.
Which brings us to the protocol. Because if you find yourself in a room where this emotional bleed is happening, or you feel your own inner temple cracking, you can't just take an aspirin or take a few deep breaths and assume you're safe.
No, you need a strategy.
You need a rigorous, tactical, spiritual survival strategy. The sources provide a 9-step protocol for the psyche. And the very first line of defense is raw physical presence.
It begins with consciousness as a shield. When the shadow tries to pull you into a trance of fear, you must engage in militant physical presence. You have to literally feel the soles of your feet pressing into the floor.
Grounding yourself.
Yes. You engage your physical senses to freeze the shadow's momentum by pulling your awareness violently back into the present moment.
And once you are anchored in your body, you have to establish an immediate internal boundary. A violent internal refusal of the emotional contagion. You literally have to tell yourself, that is not my energy, not right now. You refuse to let their chaotic shadow fuse with yours.
And if the field is too strong, the next tactical move is strategic withdrawal. You physically leave the room.
Just walk out.
You break visual and physical contact. You use silence as a sword to protect your porous energy field from further infection. You remove yourself from the blast radius.
And once you are clear, you have to name the force. Ancient mystery schools knew that calling out a fear or a trauma by its true name strips it of its unchecked power.
Name it to tame it.
Exactly. If it's a fear of abandonment, you say it out loud. You drag it out of the subconscious and into the light of objective observation.
Which requires a physiological anchor to maintain your composure while you do that. This is where anchoring the breath comes in. The breath is the physiological scaffolding for the mind.
Because it controls the nervous system.
Exactly. Rhythmic, deep breathing sends a mechanical signal to the vagus nerve, which in turn commands the shattered nervous system to reorganize and calms the hyperactive brain.
While you are breathing, you have to redirect your perception. If your mind is spiraling, you stare at a fixed physical point. The texture of a brick wall, the warmth of a coffee mug in your hands. You use physical reality to break the hypnotic, spiraling trance of the shadow's voice.
And this prepares you for the most difficult, counterintuitive phase of the protocol, reintegrating the heart.
This one is huge.
It is. The shadow you are running from is not a demon. It is a guard dog you abandoned a long time ago. It is holding the painful truths, the necessary boundaries, and the raw power you are too weak or too polite to carry. You must listen to what it's trying to tell you, without allowing it to consume you.
I really have to emphasize how hard that specific step is for people. Our biological instinct when panic or deep shame hits is to run, to distract ourselves, to scroll on our phones, or to pour a drink.
We'll do anything to escape it.
We will do literally anything to avoid sitting down and having a quiet cup of coffee with our deepest trauma. But if we don't, the shadow will keep hunting us, and the egregore will keep finding a way in.
Facing it requires activating a specific part of your consciousness, calling the witness. You must summon the higher self, the inner watcher that observes the panic and the pain without being the panic.
It's the eye of the storm.
Exactly. It is the core of your identity that remains calm and observant even as the psychological temple collapses around it.
And finally, you hold the line. You endure the storm, you hold the boundaries, you hold the breath, and you observe the shadow until the chaotic energy naturally exhausts itself and the psyche rebalances into a new state of strength.
The question then becomes, when the storm finally clears, and the shadow is integrated, and the scaffolding of the false persona comes down safely, what happens to the human being? What do we become?
We arrive at the cosmic climax of Steiner's vision and the ultimate evolutionary destiny of the heart.
According to this esoteric framework, the heart is actively evolving into a new sense organ, an organ of supersensible perception.
Supersensible perception.
It will allow future humanity to directly perceive spiritual realities, to read cosmic rhythms intuitively, and to engage in unmediated soul-to-soul communion with others.
It is the ultimate dissolution of the mask. In this future state, external deception will become functionally impossible because we will feel each other's inner truths, intentions, and emotional states directly through our unified heart fields.
You literally couldn't lie if you wanted to.
Right. We return to a state of unity, but with a massive evolutionary difference. We retain our hard-won, fully conscious individual freedom. We aren't slipping back into an ancient passive hive mind where we just hear voices commanding us. We are fully individuated beings, freely choosing to connect and love.
And this spiritual evolution has a theorized geometric reality to it, which is fascinating. Just as modern cosmology theories, like the Poincare homology sphere, suggest the entire universe might be shaped like a complex 12-sided dodecahedron.
Wait, dodecahedron?
Yeah, 12-sided shape. The esoteric sources state that the localized etheric field of the human heart is evolving into a tesseract that resolves into this exact same shape.
So the heart matches the universe.
The human heart becomes the ultimate perfected expression of the microcosm, reflecting the geometry of the macrocosm.
The ascended heart. The sources note something incredibly fascinating about this too. The fully evolved etheric heart is destined to expand and rise above the physical head,
which provides a stunning anatomical explanation for phenomena across global spiritual traditions. It explains the tingly sensation or pressure at the crown chakra described in Tibetan Buddhism and yogic traditions.
Oh wow, I never connected those.
Right. It also explains the radiant, glowing halos painted around the heads of saints and illuminated beings in esoteric and religious art.
So it's not just art.
No, the halo isn't just a poetic metaphor for holiness or a stylistic choice. It is an anatomical reality of the ascended, glowing, etheric heart field rising above the intellect.
But how did this grand evolutionary plan get set in motion? Because humanity was locked in that era of separation and the world was a very dark place. How did the seed of this future heart get planted?
To understand the catalyst for this transformation, we have to look briefly at the esoteric history of the Earth. According to Steiner, ever since the ancient Atlantean epoch, the Earth and human consciousness have essentially been dying.
Dying how?
They've been caught in a vice grip between two opposing, destructive spiritual forces. On one side, you have Ahriman. We can think of Ahriman today as the ultimate Silicon Valley nightmare.
Like cold AI logic.
Exactly. Pure, soulless, hyper-rational, materialist machine logic that seeks to turn humans into biological computers. But on the other side, you have Lucifer, which represents ungrounded, detached spiritual bliss, a force that seeks to pull humans completely out of the physical world into an illusion of pure light, abandoning the earth entirely.
That's a terrible choice. Becoming a cold, hyper-rational meat computer or a floating, disconnected ghost trying to escape reality.
Precisely. It's a dead end either way. So to save the Earth and rescue human evolution from these two extremes, a cosmic seed of life, which Steiner refers to as the Christ impulse, had to be anchored directly into physical matter.
But I'm guessing that kind of energy is dangerous.
It is. This immense cosmic energy could not just drop into an ordinary human body, it would shatter it. This required preparing a perfect, highly resilient human vessel over centuries.
And how did they build this vessel?
According to the deepest esoteric sources, this preparation involved the complex merging of two distinct spiritual streams, represented in esoteric lore by two different Jesus boys from different lineages.
Okay, two streams.
One stream carried the reincarnated soul of Zarathustra, possessing deep earthly wisdom, ego strength, and mastery of the physical world. The other stream carried the pure, untouched innocence of the Buddha and the ancient, dreamlike Lemurian age.
So a soul that had never fully descended into the hardening physical matter.
Exactly. When these two opposing streams of deep wisdom and pure innocence finally merged into one vessel, they created a perfectly balanced human architecture. This vessel was uniquely capable of withstanding the descent of this massive cosmic impulse, effectively planting a seed of divine, unifying meaning back into the dying, polarized Earth.
So what does this all mean for us sitting here today? It means the hard sciences, the mechanical engineers studying fluid dynamics, the Doppler ultrasounds, mapping vortex rings, the neurocardiology, mapping 40,000 neurites, the physics of easy water, and the deep ancient mysticism, the karmic blueprints, the etheric geometry, the integration of the shadow. They aren't fighting a war against each other.
They aren't mutually exclusive at all.
No, they are the left and right hands of divine consciousness finally awakening within humanity. They're simply two different vocabularies describing the exact same evolutionary leap.
They are mapping the journey from separation back to unity, guided by the very organ beating in the center of your chest.
We have covered a staggering amount of ground in this deep dive. We started by unlearning the mechanical lie of the heart as a pressure pump and discovered a self-sustaining vortex driven by light and water.
We really went everywhere.
We witnessed the teenage crucible where the macrocosm of cosmic law meets the microcosm of personal karma. We stared down the terrifying shadow of the silent inversion, tracked the collective madness of the egregore, and learned how to build a shield of consciousness. And we finally arrived at the 12-sided cosmic rebirth of the human heart.
That's a lot to process.
It is. I want to remind you, the listener, that your heart is an oracle. It is a meticulous recorder of your moral deeds, a highly sensitive antenna attuned to the earth, and the anchor point for the cosmic blueprint of your soul. But before we go, I want to leave you with one deeply unsettling but fascinating thought experiment to mull over on your own, drawn directly from the implications of our sources today.
It is a profound question to consider in the modern medical era.
If the human heart is not merely a mechanical pump meant to move biological plumbing, if it is in fact a highly evolved sense organ containing its own neural network, deeply encoded memories, the crystallized karma of your life's moral deeds, and your unique, unrepeatable etheric blueprint, what actually happens during a physical heart transplant?
It really makes you wonder.
When a surgeon removes a donor's heart and sews it into the chest of a living recipient, are we inadvertently transferring the etheric echoes, the unresolved shadow, and the moral karmic ledger of one soul directly into the consciousness of another?
That's a heavy thought.
As medical science continues to treat the human body like a biological machine made of interchangeable parts, we might be performing profound, world-altering spiritual surgery without having any idea what we are really doing. The universe has never been silent. It has always been speaking. And now your heart is finally learning how to listen.